Welcome to this AQA GCSE Geography revision blast. Today we're focusing on urban, looking at the UK context, which is part of the Urban Issues and Challenges unit on paper 2. We're going to start off today with a round of true or false statements. So our first statement is this one. The southeast of England has a higher population density than other areas. Is this true or false? Okay, let's have a look. It is true, and much of that is obviously due to the location of London and the the surrounding areas very close to London, but it does have a higher population density than other areas of the UK. Number 2, Highland areas tend to have very low population densities. Is this true or false? Okay, let's have a look. It is true. So this is for a number of reasons. The main reason being that highland areas are just much more difficult to build settlements. So they have less accessibility. They tend to be quite isolated and remote. The relief of the land makes it very difficult to build. And also they tend to have a less favourable climate, so less people want to live there. Right, number 3, all areas in the north of England have low population densities. Is this true or false? Okay, let's have a look. It is false. So although generally we do have a higher population density overall in the southeast, there are lots of areas in the north of England where there are high population densities. So there are lots of large cities. We've got Manchester, we've got Newcastle, we've got Leeds, amongst many up in the north. Okay, number 3. Cities are fairly evenly spread out across the UK. Is this true or false? Okay, let's have a look. It is false. So they are not spread out evenly at all across the UK. So there are, again, like there's sort of clusters in certain parts. If we look at the, in England, for example, you've got clusters of cities around the Midlands. You have got clusters in the northwest. Then you've got areas like East Anglia, for example, where there are few cities. Okay, last one. There are more cities in England than the rest of the UK combined. Is this true or false? Okay, let's have a look. It is true, which makes sense because obviously England has a much higher population than the rest of the UK combined, although the actual land mass itself isn't hugely larger than the others. But if we think about Scotland, if we think about Wales, there are significant areas where you've got areas of highlands. So you've got Snowdonia, the Brecon Beacons in Wales, you've got the Southern Uplands, you've got the Grampians, you've got the Highlands in Scotland, which means that you are going to have less space for people generally. Right, let's move on to altered vowels. So we're now going to have a look at some urban issues. These urban issues have had the vowels changed to an alternative. You need to work out what the key issues are. So these are issues that are problems across UK cities. Let's have a look. Okay, number 1. So this is quite a tricky one to begin with. Maybe have a look at the last word. That might be slightly easier to work out. If you need a bit more time to work them out, then pause the video at any point. Let's reveal the answer. It is antisocial behaviour. So across the country, there are areas in cities where there are pockets of antisocial behaviour and sort of quite high crime related to that. Number 2, maybe a little bit easier to work this one out. Okay, let's reveal. We have high property prices. So this is an issue in many cities, particularly London. We know that London is incredibly expensive to live, but there are also cities around the country where property prices are starting to grow really quickly. So a really good example of that is Manchester, where there are certain parts of Manchester now which are really, really expensive, whereas perhaps in the past they were not. So that's an area where young people in Manchester are really struggling to get onto the property ladder because they've seen those prices increase so much. Right, number 3. And this is linked to that one. Okay, we work this one out. Okay, we have rogue landlords. So these are landlords that are taking advantage of the people that they are renting their properties out to. So if we think about renting across UK cities, many years ago, lots of people would have rented council houses. There is less council stock in terms of housing nowadays because we had a big sell-off of council properties in the 1980s and in the 1990s. So there are huge waiting lists for council properties, and the idea of a council property is that you are paying a relatively low amount of rent. So they're really good for people on lower incomes. And the idea behind it is that it's not for profit renting out, whereas landlords do rent out for profits. They're buying up property and they are renting out property in order to make an income. Now, this causes a couple of problems. So they're renting out, they're buying housing stock, which means that there is less housing stock available to people who actually want to buy their own homes, and it does drive up prices. But it also means that we have people on low incomes who are having to live in private rented accommodation, which is quite expensive. Now, when we talk about rogue landlords, these are landlords that perhaps take advantage of that situation, and they charge people not a small amount of money to live in not particularly nice properties that are not very well maintained, knowing that the level of renting stock across cities in the UK is so low that people haven't really got any choice but to live in their sort of not very well maintained properties, which might suffer from, issues with damp. They might have appliances that are not working properly, but the landlords know that if their tenants kick up a stink, they can get rid of them quite quickly, and they will quickly have someone else in that property, even if their property is not very well maintained. So number 4 is this one. Okay, a bit easier, hopefully, particularly the first word. Have we worked it out? It is traffic congestion. This is a massive issue in UK cities. And finally, linked to traffic congestion, okay, we worked this one out. It is poor air quality. So cities such as London, Manchester, Birmingham, where there are issues of traffic congestion, particularly during rush hour, but not always during rush hour, have really high levels of pollutants in the atmosphere, which means that people are breathing in quite dangerous levels of pollution through the air. Right, let's move on. Okay, so the horrible klaxon there is just to remind you that as part of this unit of work, you need to know an example of one UK city. So lots of you will have studied London because it is the capital city. It's in one of the textbooks. Lots of you will have also studied Bristol because it's in the other textbook that is quite popular amongst departments. Some of you might have studied Birmingham or Manchester or others that are a bit closer to you. But you do need to remember that there are specific details that you need to be able to talk about in certain exam questions. So you might get an exam question that asks about a redevelopment in your city. It might ask about inequalities in your named city. It might ask about how the character has changed or how the population has changed. So you do need to make sure that you know some key facts and figures. So the rest of the revision blast is going to focus on cities in general, but we are just going to have a think about London for the next activity, just because lots of you will have studied it, but also if you haven't studied London specifically, it is the capital city, so you are likely to know these anyway. We're going to do a Give Me 3 activity, and we want to look at 3 ways that London is important as a global city. You've got 30 seconds to note down 3 things. Okay, let's have a look. So give me 3 ways that London is important as a global city. Well, firstly, it's one of the 2 most important financial centres in the world. The other one is New York. It is home to the headquarters of many large international companies, and it's important in terms of culture, entertainment and tourism. So, for example, you've got the BBC, you've got football clubs, we've got world-class museums, you've got West End theatres, all sorts of things that draw people into the UK. And they come in because that's where those things are based. Right, let's have a look at 3 reasons why London is experiencing a housing crisis. So actually, this possibly would be relevant for whatever UK city you have studied as well. So 3 reasons that London is experiencing a housing crisis. Off we go. Okay, let's have a look. So 3 reasons that London's experienced a housing crisis. We've got the demand outstripping supply, so house prices have risen dramatically and are unaffordable to many. Now, this is really interesting in London in particular because you've got places like Haringey, which maybe a decade ago was considered to be quite a deprived area, somewhere where lots of people wouldn't want to live. And it's now up and coming, where the house prices have increased so much that, again, local people are not able to afford to live there anymore. You've got old housing stock, particularly terraced housing, which has been demolished and replaced with apartments, which are less family friendly. And we've got the lack of council housing, so those on low incomes have to pay expensive rents. Right, our last Give Me 3 moves away from London, although obviously you can talk about London in your answer. So give me 3 signs that your city is a multicultural one. So when we're thinking about cities, what do we look for in a multicultural city? Off we go. Okay, 3 signs that a city is multicultural. So we have things like religious and cultural buildings. So for example, there may be mosques and synagogues in your city. Food, so areas of the city that specialise in global cuisine. You have, again, if we're looking at London, you've got Brick Lane in East London. You've got the Curry Mile in Birmingham. There's all sorts of places where there is a distinct link between food and certain cultures. And then we have number 3, people wearing traditional clothing that represents their cultural heritage. So again, depending on where you are much more likely to see clothing that perhaps we wouldn't traditionally think was part of UK heritage, although it is becoming more and more part of it because obviously we are a really multicultural country. Right, we're going to move on to a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 activity. Now you're going to have 2 minutes to answer the following. So we want 5 benefits of urban greening. We want 4 issues with transport in UK cities, 3 reasons that waste management is an issue in UK cities, 2 ways to improve air quality in UK cities, and 1 example of inequality in a UK city. So 2 minutes, off you go. If you need more time at the end, then please pause the video.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, hopefully you have managed to get that done in 2 minutes. If you need to pause the video to give yourself more time, then obviously you can do so. Let's have a look. So 5 benefits of urban greening. So the idea of it creating more green space across cities. So firstly, trees absorb CO2 and they produce oxygen, so they are filtering air. They provide valuable wildlife habitats. In cities, many people don't have their own gardens, so access to green space is important for mental health. And this was a massive issue during the COVID pandemic. Trees and green spaces reduce the risk of flooding by increasing infiltration rates, and people can use green spaces for growing food, such as allotments, which obviously links quite nicely to the UK Resource Management Unit. Right, let's have a look at 4. So we're looking at 4 issues with transport in UK cities. So firstly, we have congestion, particularly at rush hour. Although in some of the big UK cities, it can be congested all day long. Expensive public transport systems, we've got air pollution emitted by vehicle exhaust, and it can be unsafe to cycle in lots of cities across the UK. 3 reasons that waste management is an issue in UK cities. Well, the population growth is putting extra pressure on existing services, so there's just that lack of infrastructure. There's huge amounts of waste generated by leisure and hospitality, as well as from domestic usage. So, for example, if you're out on the streets of London at night, you will see these great big, huge shared waste bins where restaurants are emptying out great big bags of rubbish and they are just piling up in the streets in the middle of the night. And many people live in flats with shared waste facilities, which are often not big enough to cope. So it is really difficult if you've just got these huge big waste bins where you're putting in your bin liners. Lots of people living in flats don't have access to things like composting services or even recycling facilities, which means that everything just goes into the general waste. 2 ways to improve air quality in UK cities. So firstly, you can think about superhighways for cyclists that are separate from the road. So this makes more people feel safe to cycle to work. Therefore, they're more likely to cycle and not go in cars. Then we've also got the increase the electric vehicle charging network to encourage more people away from petrol and diesel cars. So again, these 2 things there should have an improvement in air quality. And one example of inequality in a UK city. So the example that lots of you will be quite familiar with if you do the London case study is there is a huge difference in life expectancy between East and West London. So if we look at Newham, which is one of the poorest boroughs in London, the life expectancy here is 79. If we then move across to West, you've got Kensington and Chelsea, where the life expectancy is 90. So a great big discrepancy there. Right, we're going to move on to an on-balance activity now, and we're going to think about the idea of using brownfield sites. So brownfield sites are ones that have been used previously. They've often been left derelict for a number of years, so they're old sites that have been used in the past. And this is in comparison to greenfield sites, which are brand new. So we're looking at 2 advantages of developing brownfield sites in urban areas, and then obviously we're going to have a look at some of the negatives in a minute. So what we would like you to do is to think about these sites, pause the video, note down 2 benefits of developing brownfield sites. Once you're ready, unpause the video and we'll have a look at what you've come up with. If you haven't already paused the video, please do so because we are about to reveal the answers. So let's have a look at 2 advantages of developing brownfield sites. Well, firstly, very rundown areas of the city gets redeveloped, which vastly improves the environment. But it also reduces urban sprawl as the area has been developed previously, which saves the countryside. So rather than having to expand the city beyond and moving out into the surrounding areas, you are making use of areas that are actually already in the city. But there are some disadvantages of developing brownfield sites. So pause the video, have a think about what some of the disadvantages and the drawbacks of these brownfield sites would be. Once you've got a couple noted down, then unpause the video. Okay, if you haven't paused the video already, please do because we are about to reveal. Right, let's have a look. So firstly, we might need to demolish or decontaminate old sites and buildings. So this might be needed. That then means that it suddenly makes the whole process much more expensive and less attractive for developers. It may also disturb urban wildlife habitat, so areas where wildlife have been sort of moved in and have lived quite happily and undisturbed in these sort of scraps of wasteland. Suddenly that their habitats might be destroyed. It also can be quite noisy for existing residents as well, but at the end of the day it is going to improve the area, so generally residents will kind of put up with the disturbance. Okay, we're going to finish off the session with some multiple choice questions. We have 5. Let's have a look at our first one. Which of the following is a characteristic of the CBDs, the Central Business District? A, it's where large retail and business parks are located. B, it is where semi-detached housing is mainly found. C, it is where old terraced housing is found along new redevelopment initiatives. And D, it's where large shops and offices are mainly found. So which of the following is a characteristic of the CBD? Okay, let's have a look. It is D, where large shops and offices are mainly found. Number 2, which of the following is a characteristic of the suburbs? It is where semi-detached housing is mainly found. For A. B, it is where old terraced housing is found alongside new redevelopment initiatives. C, is where large shops and offices are mainly found. And D, is where large retail and business parks are located. Okay, let's have a look at the answer. A, it's where semi-detached housing is mainly found. Right, 3. Which of the following is a characteristic of the rural-urban fringe? So this is the area right on the edge of the city. A, is where large retail and business parks are located. B, is where large shops and offices are mainly found. C, is where semi-detached housing is mainly found. And D, is where old terraced housing is found alongside new redevelopment initiatives. So we're looking for a characteristic of the rural-urban fringe. Let's reveal. It is where large retail and business parks are located because they enjoy the benefits of A, large open spaces, which are considerably cheaper than buying land inside the city centre area. And they've got space to redevelopment, but you also get good transport links on the edge. Number 4, which of the following helps to reduce congestion? A, urban greening schemes. B, park and ride schemes. C, urban recycling schemes. And D, domestic energy conservation schemes. Okay, let's reveal. It is park and ride schemes. And our last question is, which of the following is an environmental benefit of urban greening schemes? A, they improve water conservation. B, they encourage exercise and good health. C, they encourage the recycling of waste. And D, they reduce the risk of flooding by increasing interception. So which of the following is an environmental benefit of urban greening schemes? Okay, let's have a look. It is D. So they reduce the risk of flooding. Now they do also encourage exercise and good health, but that's not an environmental benefits. But it is worth reminding you that it's really important to read your multiple choice questions very carefully, because sometimes there's another answer that sounds feasible as well. Right, well done for getting to the end of this revision blast. We've covered lots of little activities that have looked at your recall and your understanding of urban in terms of the UK context. What we would like you to do, or we recommend you do, is have a look at the other revision blasts in the playlist. We have covered every subtopic right across the specification. And the final thing for me to do is just to wish you the very best of luck across those 3 papers in the next few weeks. Good luck.